da rein?
Keine Ahnung.
Hello. And all this stuff going on, it's much easier just to press fit it in there, and then it's permanent, it won't come out. Especially when you're assembling it, you don't have to sit there and worry about it falling out of the knife as soon as the screw comes loose. So we don't have the problem of lost pivots and parts when it comes to that.
Oh, awesome. But this is still under guarantee? Does he have to pay for it?
For something like that, this is the customer's fault. And so what we do is it's still guaranteed, but we charge you a fee to replace it. For a blade of this size, anywhere between $40 to $60, but we will replace the blade. The thing is, though, the knife has to come in to be fitted by a technician because there's just no way for a person at home to get in and do all the lock geometry and all the things that need to happen to get it together, you know. But, you know, every single knife that comes through here, you know, we have the customer's name. And we send them out. When we get the sheets of steel, don't worry about scratching them or anything. They're totally fine.
Okay.
So what happens is we get the sheets of steel initially, and they're just a whole big plain sheet. And it's not flat. So we have to first send it out before we ever even touch it to a grinder to make it completely flat within parameters. And then what we do is, you know, using the wire EDM, which is the one thing that we're not able to show you guys, we cut out the blade profiles and everything to a rough shape, which is essentially this right here. And the thing is, you have to leave it thick because the heat treat puts a lot of strain and stress on the metal, and it can warp.
Yeah.
And if it warps and the blade is real thin, it's more likely to warp. So basically, we send them out to the heat treat, and they come back like this. And then what we do is we have our burger grinder on the opposite end of the building here, and they get fed into a jig that goes in there, and this thing goes up and it grinds the blade. And the really cool thing with the burger grinder is it'll go in and it'll grind, and then before it resets the grind again, inside of the machine, it redresses the wheel and takes all and puts a fresh layer on there, and it recalculates for all the tolerance differences and everything on the fly, and goes back in and makes another pass on there.
Okay.
When you see a lot of other companies, when you see over here, and then we have basically, you know, the adjuster and all that stuff, everything's hooked up to an actual vacuum system. So this is a large vacuum here. There's another one there. It's all around the pipes so that we can turn it on. You have the flume here that you can adjust. And basically all of the grindings get pulled down into this and sucked into the machine, so we don't have all this crap floating around in the air where we're wearing breathers and all this other stuff.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even see some of the stuff that it doesn't grab. You know, it's just really fine. Everything from glass fiber to steel powder to just stuff you don't want in the air. So, you have one that's not glued? Okay.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah. So it's just basically what they do is you have your breather holes machine in here. You know, you get this, we use this really strong black glue. And just a little bit of this stuff. And then, you know, you just slip the inlay in there, and then they have an accelerator that they spray, and it dries all of that. Yep.
Okay.
And then, of course, the thing is you have to be very careful, because if you don't let it dry completely and you put a blade in there, it will adhere to the blade, and then you have a spot on the blade that you can't get off of there. But this stuff is amazing. I mean, it really holds these inlays in there. It's just a Loctite 380 black, and it works unbelievable. So this is kind of what happens when people call and they say, do you have a Ivory micarta inlay for a Godsend? You gotta kind of come over here and just see what we have. You know, do we have the inlays? Because they first have to be cut down to size, and then somebody has to come in here by hand and do all the hand tailoring to it that the machine can't do. So it's a lot of work, but it's, you know, generally we tend to keep some stock, you know, woods and different materials and stuff, and we'll keep them kind of separated. Yeah, like that's Jig Brown, you know, bone.
Yeah, I see.
Got some of the, those ones got machined a little bit too much and got broken. Sometimes we'll keep those because what we do is we use them to test lasering and different things and stuff like that.
Okay.
Or we'll use them as training material too, to let somebody that's not skilled to go in and, you know, mess around on. Came up with this wheel system, and you know, basically what you do is just come over here and place the blade on this, and it has all the teeth cut into it. And we have the 2 different sizes for the different size knives, and you know, it's all hooked up to the vacuum system and everything. Flip this thing on, and then basically you kind of use this to get behind the blade. It's just a block of wood, and hold it on there, and just let this thing cut down in there and do its job. And it's really quite remarkable. You can cut quite a few blades with that. Check this out. This is an extra one of those wheels.
Very expensive. Oh.
Holy!
Yeah.
Like really heavy.
Yeah. So you can imagine the amount of torque this thing has to put out to be able to withstand a spin fast enough to cut that blade. It's definitely not a light material.
Yeah.
You know, so it's smart. You know, I'm not sure if this is like a wheel chassis for something. Right wheel, and then this is going to be the finer one. And yeah, that's what they'll do is they'll get the blade. You know, this thing comes on. It spins pretty quick.
Yeah.
Nice and quiet.
Schön mit Luft absaugen.
Nice.
Yep, and it's just, the thing with this is because it's round, you have to have that muscle memory to go in here and just and take the blade across and get one clean grind and repeat it across the blade. But you know, when you're sitting here doing it 8 hours a day, you pick it up pretty quickly. You basically just have this side right here where you can get in there and you got, you know, your work gloves and everything to protect you. You actually have to be off the ground because this thing will generate static electricity, and if you're grounded, it can shock you. That's
not fun, I guess.
Oh no, it'll build up a good amount of energy. Yeah, he gets the blade on there and does it until he brings up the burr. And so, you know, on these particular ones, if you feel the edge, it's very coarse. You can feel the burr that's on there. And that's what the last step is the leather buffing wheel. And he just runs that under there, and it takes the burr off and also polishes the edge. And that's the secret to getting a really sharp knife.
Und danach werden sie anodisiert, oder?
Ja, obwohl, die werden jetzt soweit fertig sein, denke ich mal. He just asked if they're going to anodization after it, but I think the handle is done. This is how the handle will
so
look
this
like.
This is one of the last steps that we do. So before they get assembled, they're already anodized.
Yeah,
they're heat treated. Everything's done. So they come to me, and this is just a belt grinder. Runs about 3,600 RPM, and I was trained by another guy who's not here. He's away at SHOT Show right now, and you know, so
pretty much what it is it's a federal ban. So our government banned it across the entire United States in the 50s, but they let it be enforced at the state level. So the state writes the laws on how they're going to exercise that law. And then recently, Knife Rights, AKTI, a few of those guys, you know, Doug Ritter and stuff, went through, and they've been challenging those laws and getting those laws turned over because they're old. You know, back in the 50s, basically what happened was you had a lot of, you know, knives like this, not as modern, but nail nick, two-handed opening knives. And you had a lot of guys coming back from Europe with switchblades and the Philippines with bully-songs, and nobody had knives that opened that swiftly. And they were very quickly put into movies portrayed by bad guys carrying it. Yeah. And so people said, oh my God.
It's very politically driven.
Very politically driven. It's fear-driven. And so they said, oh, we have to ban these knives. They're dangerous. Well, now we have things that open as soon as you pull them out of your pocket, and they're perfectly fine.
Yeah, like Emerson.
Yeah, Emerson, all that stuff. The interesting thing with this is when you feel how sharp all the corners are on that. So it comes out of that.
It's very soft.
It is now because it's untreated. And so, you know, it comes out of there. They basically have to check the different measurements. They use this deburr and very gently get the burrs and the flakes off of it. And then once they do, they get all stacked in here. And basically, this is what's going into the fixture. It's amazing how light this stuff is. It doesn't weigh anything.
Oh, it sounds like...
Oh, for real? So this is like before and this is after.
Correct.
Okay.
It's all, you know, aircraft grade, very, very high. The way you can tell this is really good aluminum is that all of it's been stamped.
Yeah.
So it's all been tested. It's all, you know, we know exactly the chemical makeup of this stuff. It's a very precise alloy. You know, there's a lot of companies where they just buy kind of whatever. Yeah, it's amazing, you know. It's very cool that, you know, you can go from just having a regular piece of, you know, bar stock to pop it in the machine, and, you know, I think something like 45 minutes later we'll have all these safeties and stuff.
Neu Messer mit dem Klammer. Ist es neu? Neu. It's a new one?
No.
It's a new model?
We've had that one for a little while.
It's just a sprint with a
Special series.
Yeah, that's the 3-wave sprint that we're doing. Done that one for a little while, started adding some texturing to it and stuff to break up the pattern a little bit. Yeah, they're very, very nice.
mini rock eye.
What they're running at, Johnny? 15 minutes per side? 15 and a half. Yeah, so 15 minutes, that table will flip around after he sets it up, and then he'll reset it again, and it just keeps going. We're just cranking these things out because we had, I think, what was it? Our first live picture over. The amazing thing with carbon fiber is how much it wears down the bits. This stuff just destroys tool bits like you wouldn't believe. It goes right through it. You know, the goal basically is once it's cutting and everything, he'll come in there and smooth it out and get it to roughly fit the handles.
Yeah. That's perfect. Sehr schön.
And what we'll do on weaker materials like pearl and stuff like that is we'll actually glue it to a backing of G10 or something firmer. We'll put it in there and let it machine in, and then we'll flip it over and a very fine planing piece will go over and cut the remaining material off of it.
Yeah.
And
Genauso alt wie bei Chipperpop. It's kleiner noch. How much plates can do offset?
so the distance area that you can stack them on is this right here. So it's all going to depend on how many. 3 months after I started here, we started hitting 2,000 units. And
2,000.
Yeah, and then we.
You can choose for the lengths.
Yes, there's water in here, and there's a pad, and then it's a little heater, and you got all your different lengths depending on the box. So for the end, I only need 6 inches. Cuts it, gets the glue wet.
Yeah.
Boom.
Cool. Jetzt hast du den Schaftkopf.
Super durable tape. It holds up. It takes any kind of abuse, and it takes probably about maybe a minute, and it's dry and it's not going anywhere.